Stride.
Stride.
Hagley Australian Stride.
And what about this one, Tanksley?
And thanks to the audiovisual department of the school, we have some talented young people who are going to be running the videotape, and we hope to get pictures. So it would be helpful if you have a comment to make, if you would mention your name and maybe when you graduated, if you did graduate, and that would help us a lot in playing this. We've got a wonderful cast of characters here, some very distinguished graduates from this wonderful school, and it's a great pleasure to celebrate the 60th anniversary of the dedication of this school. We have a few pro forma things to do. This is an official meeting of the Egbert Benson Historical Society of Red Hook, and so before we start, do we have any minutes? Where's our secretary? What kind of minutes would you like? Brief, very brief minutes is what we would like.
We have minutes from July 20th meeting, and we have minutes from the annual dinner. Neither, I don't.
Would anybody like to waive the reading of the minutes? May I have a second?
Second.
So be it. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, Nancy, you're off the hook. But we do like to hear the treasurer's report, and that always usually gives us pleasure. Mary Choppy is our wonderful treasurer.
We'll get up here so everybody can hear, hopefully. Our balance as of June 22nd was $4,640.71. We had receipts over the summer totaling $411.43, which made our receipts plus our balance $5,052.14. Disbursements during the summer amounted to $923.56. So our balance on hand at the end of the summer, well, almost at the end of the summer, $4,128.58. We did add $500 to our existing CD, so that CD is due 2/29/00, and that balance is $1,034.85, bringing our grand total to $5,163.43.
Thank you, Mary. I hope you notice that due date is not only in the new millennium, but also on the 29th of February. I hope the bank knows that. I made her check that for sure before I approved it. I would like to mention the fact that we're doing a special newsletter on the 60th anniversary, and hope to have it done and in the mail to you all before the meeting. Anyone who's a member of the Historical Society should be receiving it very shortly. If you're not a member of the Historical Society, I emphasize if you're not a member, we would love to have you become one, but we would be happy also to send you this special anniversary issue if you will sign your name and address on this paper here. I'm very grateful to the people who have contributed to the exhibits that you see scattered around the room, particularly, and then some of you brought things in, and I'm not even going to acknowledge you, I'm afraid, because I didn't see you walk in, but I know Fred Briggs brought some things to show. Kay Dillman gave us some things to show. Who else that I didn't mention? she's done a wonderful job of inventorying the historic resources of the school. And their really early papers and books are safely stored away in Iron Mountain across the way. They don't even trust them to this very fine school here. So we're very pleased that you did get one particular ledger that goes all the way back to the founding of our town to 1813. It's well worth looking at, and she's made copies of some of the pages so that you can actually handle them. And really this program began with Hildegard because she put together something similar to this for the students of the school last spring. And I went over and I was lucky enough to hear these two gentlemen speaking, Bob Rockefeller, and who's this guy here? I think he used to be an official around here, didn't he? Jack Lewis. And they spoke about their time, and Emma Kuhn has spoken about her memories, and Woody Close in the back. So Woody, I wish you wouldn't sit so far in the back. It's unlike you to be backstage. You're usually front stage. And I'm told that your voice carries, but still, we'd like to have you participate. And any and all of you, this is meant to be a very informal discussion. But I'd like to just have a brief welcome from Hildegard, and then we're going to turn it over to Jack Lewis.
Welcome to you all. I hope that some of you came to the celebration that was held here back in the spring when they had the spaghetti dinner and the tour of the building. And because about 5 or 6 years ago I was involved in cataloging the archival holdings of the district for another project, I became aware at that time, because I'm not a Red Book person, I've lived in Kingston for 25 years and grew up in Brooklyn, New York. But I became aware at that time of the anniversary date of this building and began to remind people as it was approaching. So since I knew what the archival holdings were and had packed them off for Iron Mountain, I got the boxes back that I thought would be helpful. And we had 2 trophy cases on exhibit in the library filled with yearbooks and the memorabilia that you see. And I was able to make copies of a lot of the things, like the original building contract. This building cost only about $500,000. And almost half of that came from the federal government. And the 60th anniversary was September 6th of this year. The chairs in the library, which are hard rock maple, which we still have, and they will be removed over my dead body or in my absence because they don't make them like that anymore. They were $7.50 a chair. But that was 1/3 to half of the average weekly wage, depending where you lived. I have some statistics on a paper on that back table that came off the internet, which tells you the price of gas, the price of bread, the price of the average home on any day in this century. And that's where I drew those statistics. So they were still very costly. And a lot of that original furniture is still in the building. And then for the students, really, to have the alumni come and talk to them about their school experience, that was really a lot of fun, and I learned a great deal in hearing them. It's wonderful to work in a community like this where the roots are so close to the surface, it seems to me. It's not like Brooklyn, New York, where your village is 1 block that you live on, or maybe the parish that you live in. So this has been fun. I'd like to thank Dave and Amin, who is our camera person tonight, at last minute notice, right? When did you get the phone call?
I didn't get a phone call. I was coming here for DTS. So.
Oh, so he's doing double duty. One of the things that we really wanted to be able to make ready access to was the 3-section edition of the advertiser that came out for the building's dedication. But we had a great deal of difficulty locating a copy of it that would not fall apart in the duplication process or hadn't been scotch taped together 3 times and therefore was not suitable for duplication. And that's the kind I found only 2 sections of in the school's holdings. And the Historical Society has 2 or 3 copies, but none of which were in good shape. And then about only a week before the exhibit, we were talking about it in the office, and Marion Mergendahl said, you know, there's a box of old stuff in the safe. And I said, could I see that old stuff? Because it might be good for the exhibit. And in the box, among other things, were some of those photographs and a quite intact copy of the 3 sections of the newspaper. So I found a printer in Kingston who does copies of blueprints, because you need a big enough, you know, the sheets are huge. So we made copies at that time, 3 copies, and 1 copy was earmarked for the Historical Society, and it has been paid for by Linda Greenblatt's student in the DCS club. So I'll introduce Linda Greenblatt, who is a social studies teacher here, who can tell you what DCS stands for, and I give credit to the other 2 students who are here and then make the presentation.
Hello. About 5 years ago, I had, for quite a few years, had sent quite a few students to Washington, D.C., and as I was getting older, I was trying to get out of it. But about 5 years ago, we discovered that President Clinton was going to come to Hyde Park. And a couple students and I started talking about it, and we really wanted to be there, and we felt that with some of my former students who are in the Secret Service, that we would be able to have access to the president, and this was going to be really the coup of the century for Linden Avenue Middle School. And of course, as it turned out, if you recall, that meeting in Hyde Park turned out to be a summit between President Clinton and Boris Yeltsin, and no one was getting close. Even the Secret Service contact that I had, we could be in the parking lot, you know, across the road, which is the movie theater, if you recall. And I said, forget it. We'll try to go to Washington, and we're going to meet, you know, President Clinton, which we, of course, didn't do, although we came pretty close. We were at 8 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday. We were in the White House that year, and I think he was upstairs, maybe in the Lincoln bedroom. I don't know, but anyway, but this started this club called DCS. The students named it the District of Columbia Society, and since then we have taken many more students to Washington, D.C. And presently we have 50 members, 1 busload that we take, and we would like to, we're very gratified that we were able to give some of our money to this worthwhile cause, to the Historical Society. I think it's really very nice that what we are going to give them with is going to be in the archives of the Ellendorf Inn, which I'm very involved in forever. Well, actually, I think they're synonymous, actually, the way I'm feeling right now. But anyway, Barbara?
Thank you.
When the red looks like water.
Very appreciative of that. I have to say that just today, a young man came into our archive room, and he said, someone told me my house used to be a schoolhouse. He says, can you tell me if this is true? And so we got out our very tattered copy of this paper and very gingerly leafed through the pages. And sure enough, he said, there's my house, that's it.
speech here.
1999.
Long speech here that we use for the 8th grader, but I won't bore you with that. Just by the way of background, I grew up in Berrytown in the 30s and 40s. We were known as dock rats then. And we used to have free range of the estates in St. Joseph's, which is now the Unification Church. We ranged all the way from Delano Estate to Zabriskis in Annandale. And we leave in the morning, come back at night. And a lot of free food out there. We gather a lot of wild food, fruit and vegetables, some not so wild. The estates were very generous then. They'd allow us on Rokeby and Edgewater and Sylvania, St. Joseph's. And the focal point of our life was the station. That's all we have was the station and the general store. And in the evening, the taxis would come down.
Post office?
The general store, I'm sorry. The post office was in the general store, yes.
Yeah.
And the letter carriers would come down, and the mail carriers of the estates, Red Hook, pick up the mail for Red Hook and Annandale, etc. The farmers would come down and congregate there and talk about baseball and what have you, pitch horseshoes and so forth. And as I was saying to the 8th graders, if it hadn't been for that fire and centralization, you know, I would probably still be down here because we didn't know there was anything on the other side of that hill. We had the river.
Chamberlain Hill.
We had the river. We had the railroad. We had the states that I spoke of. So we were pretty self-sufficient. We didn't care anything about centralization. Knew very little about it. Which reminded me, looking out at the audience, I feel a little awkward when I see people like the Dillmans sitting back there and Harry Kane and Hatemans who know so much more about centralization than me. Doc as a board member, Lloyd as a board member. But it's a great place to grow up, great playground down Berrytown, but it really didn't prepare us to live in the 20th century. Having said that, I had the pleasure to talk to the 8th graders with Bob, and I learned a lot from him. I didn't realize that he witnessed the fire. I remember when it happened in '36, Bob witnessed it. So he's going to talk about that, if he will. And Lou, the other thing I'd like to do is talk about the evolution of curriculum, how we started out with this. We had an agrarian economy. Of course, your school reflects your community in the 30s and 40s. Of course, agrarian, lots of farms. And then you had the Future Farmers of America, agriculture shop, what have you, then industrial arts, for instance, and then on into the technology, computer world, how that evolved. I'd like to talk about sports. If you have interest in that, I know who does, some of the other folks play. So all those things can feed in, and feel free to jump in and add whatever you feel like interrupting. Feel free to do so. Bob?
Jack talked about the post office and the taxis going down to the station. And those were the days when if you mailed a letter in Tarrytown, it went right to Red Hook. And you went through a Newburgh sorting facility.
A little louder, a little closer to the mic.
A little closer?
Yeah, that's better, I think.
Yeah, my first, let's say, exposure to the Linden Avenue project, let's call it, was one night my mother woke me up and we looked out the bathroom window which faced south, and a big fire. We thought Albie Bottenfeld's dairy was going up. It looked like it was that close. Well, my father took off. He was a volunteer fireman, and I went back to bed because I had school the next day. I thought. He came back about an hour later and he says, "You're not going to have school. The school's burning. Come on down." So I went down, and it was a real sight. People all over the place. Route 9, there was no traffic going. I mean, you know, fire engines all over the place. And the fire started in my classroom in the 5th grade room. And as you looked at the front of the school, the 5th grade was on the top floor on the south side. That day, or the day before, we had been making these maps of Mexico out of flour and water, and we stored them in a cabinet, and the fire started right in that section, and I always thought that those maps of Mexico really got us.
You're a prime suspect.
Well, they never came together. Spontaneous combustion. Well, the fire caused, and I am not aware of all the activities that went on, but it must have been real hectic. vacation
It
of
was
a week.
I believe the fire was 2 days before your vacation was
Yeah,
supposed to start.
something like that. And they were able to line up, well, the first and second grades were next door to the high school anyway, so they survived and they were there. The third and fourth grade, as I recall now, was in what they called the barn, which was a sort of a nightclub. Tom Jennings owned it, and it's now the apartments, but it used to be a barn then. And the third and fourth grades were in there. The fifth grade, which I was in, started out in the Lutheran chapel basement. And for one, for the couple of months to finish the term off. And then the fifth grade moved to the Red Oak Inn, where the bar is, on the left side. The sixth grade ended up in Bill Johnson's house. Bill Johnson here. Anyway, they were in there for a couple of months. And then they went on the other side of the Red Oak Inn, where the dining room is. The seventh and eighth grades were in the Lutheran chapel upstairs, 2 grades in one room. Bobby Forbes was the teacher, you remember? Kept a lot of good order. The high school.
I remember Mrs. Forbes.
That was Mrs. Forbes. The high school then went to Pine Plains. They were very generous. And then they fixed up the Hoffman Inn for, I think, the other 3 years. Is that right,
3
Sid?
years. 3 years.
3 years. Yeah. Sidney graduated a year ahead of me, so he knows more than I do. He's older than I am.
But not much.
Great excitement. Oh, first of all, there was a big argument as to where to put the school. Some people wanted to build it down there where the school was, or where the soap factory was. And other people wanted to put it over here where, was it Shelley's or Tinson who owned it? I forget.
Shelley's.
Shelley. And fortunately, the people that wanted it here won out because, as I recall, I think the first year that it opened, it had the most beautiful campus in New York State. And it still does. I mean, if you just look at the mountains and everything, especially on the nice day. And then as I started school as a freshman in '39, is of course when World War II started over in Europe. So my memories of high school are all intertwined with the war and people going off to war and things like that. Another recollection I have that I'm sure many of you have is Vern Carr getting killed around Christmas time and having the funeral over in the gym right next door here because it was about the only place that would hold everybody.
Bob, just because not everybody here may know who was Vern Carr.
Well, Vern Carr was the principal of the school. I guess today he'd be the superintendent.
Yeah,
But
right.
then he was the principal of the
It's
school.
not so.
He also taught.
Ah,
He also taught.
well, I know he taught at one time. I don't know whether, I can't remember whether he taught after we opened this. I think
I
he was
don't
a little
think
too
he did.
busy when.
He didn't teach when I came up.
No, I think when this place opened, he was a little too busy. But yes, he did teach. I forget what it was. Maybe true.
I think it was a commercial teacher, because I think.
Yeah. Well, that's just to start it off. Now, who do you want to pass this around? Or
Well, I'd like to hear from some of the folks who attended that high school. I know Lou did, and Harry, Lloyd.
Oh, you mean the high school?
The high school before the fire?
Yeah. Yeah, how about that? I was...
What was that like, Harry? You survived that, didn't you?
Well, I'm going to tell you the good news. My hearing aid, my battery doesn't work. I can't even hear myself think. You fellas are lucky. I had prepared a speech an hour and a half. And I'm not kidding. I can't hear what I didn't even hear what you said, John.
Lloyd, you care to comment? You attended there, right? Lou? Lou was one of our...
I don't believe I can add too much to this conversation. I was obviously on the site. It's coincidental, I think, the fact that I was the last one to graduate from down to get me out. And they did the same thing in Red Hook. I had a lot of offers from colleges not to come.
Lou's being very modest. I read some of the old newspapers back in the mid-30s. There were a couple of championships. Lou was involved in both of those, and leading scorer, and good baseball teams and all that. So we had a real drought after that. We didn't win anything here. Maybe in '43, Bob, they won something, and then when I was here, we didn't win anything, and then into the '50s before we got good football and things turned around. But
Hey Lou, did you play basketball at Bard or at Bard College?
38, from 1938, when I moved up here, we were playing basketball at Bard.
I attended the game.
Yeah, while the high school was at the Hoffman Inn,
Yeah.
the winter sport, basketball, was at Bar.
Where,
The old,
The old
The old
gym.
gym.
Yeah, naturally, the old
right
gym.
there.
Was the baseball at Chandler Park still in 1938?
Baseball, we walked down to the old high school site and played on the diamond down there.
The question was, is Chandler Park operating at that point?
Yeah.
And I don't know.
Chandler Park, I don't know what.
That's hard to find out anything about Chandler Park.
Oh, no.
I wish someone
No,
read an article on
this
Chandler
was
Park.
on the site of the original high school.
I can't find out, I cannot find out and ask him around. Brian Moore was going to do an article on Chandler Park. And I did a lot of legwork for him. And not many people know much about it. The grandstand I thought was way out toward where the farmhouse was, but I understand where Treeble's building is.
Uh-huh.
That was the grandstand, and they hit into the sun if that's the case, but can't believe that happened, but I guess they did. And they had the racetrack and the landing strip, am I correct?
Bleachers?
But you can't find,
Bleachers is not because I was there, it's because I snooped around trying to find out all about Chandler Park.
hard going, isn't it? Really good.
Well, it was a very funny story about it because Bob Chandler, who's Chandler Chapman's uncle, brother, Sheriff Bob, uncle. There was a huge, when he went into politics, he built Chandler Park, and it was a big part of Red Hook for a good many years. But there was a huge picnic there once, which is documented in a newspaper of the day in 1906, when he and his brother, Louis Stuyvesant Chandler, were going for governor and lieutenant governor, or something like that. And there was a picnic where there were what was the figure, Barbara? 3,000 people or more?
yeah.
3, 4, 5,000 people. Anyway, that gets away from school. I just thought that maybe the school
That's interesting.
used it.
What was the funny story, Glenn?
Well, it gets away from the school. You can read it in one of the Historical Society
The past newsletter.
newsletters.
Anna, would you care to comment? I mean, you had an opportunity to speak with the students. I assume you put a lot of those things together.
I don't know how many of you know my story, but on August 23rd, 1938, I was 16 years old. And that summer, my mother and stepfather bought the house where the veterinarian is right now. And it was called a tourist home, the forerunner of bed and breakfast. On August 25th, 1938, a family with one very unhappy teenager moved from Great Neck, Long Island to Red Hook, New York. And believe me, it was a culture shock. I was used to city schools. I was used to being able to get on a bus for a nickel and ride down to the park where we had a swimming area. You could go to the movies for peanuts, get on the bus and ride home. And it was just something that I just never thought would happen to me. Coming into this community as a complete stranger can be a very, very unnerving situation. But I was very fortunate that I found that there were some mention that we went to the basketball games. We all rode on the tourist bus. Twilight Bus Line took us over there. We had a nurse in there. Her name was Mrs. Fields. And she always went along. She had the Red Cross, and we were very active at that point in time at the Hoffman Inn. The class of 1939 did not attend this school, but they did graduate from it. The class of 1939-1940 was the first class to graduate from here. And as I told somebody tonight, this school at the time of its opening was considered a state-of-the-art educational building. They had everything. I don't think what else I want to tell you.
They didn't get everything on their wish list though, Emma.
No, I'm.
They wanted telephones in every room
No,
and
but they-
radios in every room, and it didn't happen. Does that sound familiar?
Well, at that time, what they had was state-of-the-art. I was going to slip my mind what I was going to tell you, but anyhow, life was very different when we got over here. One of the things we had, and you're not going to believe this in this day and age, but we had religious education. The various religious denominations came in, and we had classes.
It wasn't required.
No, we went and had it. It was like a.
Each church had their own little class.
That's right. And of course, for the students who had lived outside of the town all the time, the cafeteria was a thing of beauty, I'm sure, because most of them, when they went to the small schools, had to carry their lunch, and here they had a full cafeteria. Let me see what else. I came up here as a junior, and I had been taking French in Great Neck. And as I told the students here, my two teachers in Great Neck were taught in the Sorbonne. Now, when I came up here, poor Marion Champlin had a terrible problem with me because she could not get me to talk French phonetically. But I want to say one thing. The French that I learned at that time stuck with me. You'd be surprised how much I can look at something in French and translate it. And I've never spoken French since I got out of high school. So the education was well worth everything. What I would like to make note of is that I'm a very active member of the Alumni Association. I'm very proud to say that I was a charter member of the Alumni Association. I've been treasurer ever since they're formed. And as you know, we're very involved with the graduating students. We're very proud to say that this year we gave 6 $500 scholarships and 2 $100 scholarships to students who were not direct descendants of alumni. We have an annual dinner. We have no other fundraisers. We depend on our dues and our generous scholarship donations. We're very proud, considering what we started with 20 years ago to what we are today.
Thank you. Harriet Norton was a student here, taught high school, and took time out to raise a family, and then came back to teach in the elementary. Harriet's been around a few years. You care to comment, Harriet?
I'm just reflecting from Emma. I
lot of good things about the Red Hook Central School, and as I listen to people recollect, I think the thing that moved me greatly about my experience here, and I was here from kindergarten through senior year, except for a year and a half out in Chicago. And when you look at television today and you watch the shootings in schools and in churches and communities across the land, I just reflect on my upbringing in Red Hook and what this community means to me and to everybody who's here. You don't get this. I talk to my brother who lives in Bethesda. He doesn't have a community. I talk to my brother who lives in Washington. My sister lives in California. They don't have what we have. We have people that we recognize, we've grown up, we've gone to school with, we know. There's a sense of family about this whole area. And that was true as we were going to school. I have a lot of painful memories about Red Hook Central. Maybe the most painful was in 8th grade when I left. My good friend Bill O'Neill took my girl from me. But another painful one was Stein Shook, the 2nd grade teacher, and you were talking about the hard rock maple chairs. I think in the 2nd grade at that time we had them. And in 1st grade, we had side-by-side seating, these little chairs like this, and in 1st grade I ran into Janice Klum, because this is a class of 1956, and Janice, who of course married Pete and was involved in the school for years and years and years. Janice, on opening day of school, was paired with me, and I sat in my little chair, and she sat at her little chair, and she took one look at me and she started crying. And so she was moved to another part of the room. But in 2nd grade, the rule was that you could not rock back on the back 2 feet of the hard maple rock chair under penalty of death. And Stein Shook, who was, when I was about that big then, and she was probably, I don't know, she seemed like she was 7 feet tall. But in any event, if you remember her, I always knew her when she was older than I think I am now, so I have no idea how old she was, but her rule was inviolate. You did not rock back on these chairs. Well, I got off the bus and horsed around with somebody that morning and had cut, scraped something in my knee. Had gone to see Mrs. Kessler. She had bandaged it, sent me off to 2nd grade. And the punishment if you rocked back on your chair was to kneel for the balance of the day at your desk. Well, I got caught, I think early in the morning. And down on my knees I went for the day. And at the end of the day, there was blood trickling down it was very dramatic. Blood trickling down the inside of my leg, and Stein Shook stood over me. She said, "Now, Woody," she said, "you certainly should have learned something, haven't you, from this?" I said, "Yes, I'm bleeding." And she looked down, and she saw this blood, and she grabbed me right by the back of my head, which was about this, and she had on a Mexican belt. You burned down the school with a Mexican map. She almost killed me with a Mexican belt. Had all these knobs and things. She was grinding my face into her, "You poor child." I was sure I was going to end up in Fred Zitzer's arms, because we were doing that at the end of the day. But those of us who went at the time, Bill O'Neill and I went, and others went in a very fortunate time. We were untouched by the wars to the extent that we were not involved in them. We missed every one that came along. Great planning by our parents. But it made a difference in the school, because in 1945 and 46 and 47, when this place really started to rock and roll and the community started to grow, we had teachers who had come out of bombers and out of tanks and out of infantry holes and out of parachutes, and these guys didn't mess around. And they were something to see. And again, I think of what we have now. My son's a teacher. He comes home and I say, "Why don't you just grab that kid by the throat and kill him?" And unfortunately, you're not allowed to do this. In those days, and everybody will remember this, Minor Treat, I think it was, who started the thing, is when you talked to Minor Treat, you stood. And some of the other teachers thought this was sort of ridiculous, but it made an impression. And it was part of the entire sense of this school then and now. And that's why I think people are different today than they were back then. And in those days, the threat of punishment was just as terrific as the punishment itself. And we were in this room one day, the gym was being used by somebody else, and the boys' gym class was in here with Lindsay Northam, and Minor Treat walked in that door, and as he got halfway out that door, somebody yelled, "Hey, Treat." And he came over and he looked at us and he said, "Who said it?" Mum's the word, not a soul stirred. Well, today, you know, somebody would sue the school for singling out somebody for saying, I don't know what would happen, but Minor had the right idea. He turned, he went down to see Lindsay Northam, whose class it was. Lindsay appeared in his grays. He wore those gray work pants and those gray shirts, and he had a cricket bat in his hand. I've ever seen a cricket bat. It's about 5/8 of an inch thick, about that wide, and I became intimately familiar with it during the hazing at Cornell several years later, when you were to assume the position and you got one of these on the rear end. And the first one I thought, yeah, you could take 50 or 60 of those. The second one got my attention, and by the third one, I thought I was going to die. Well, this was before I ran into Cornell, but Lindsay came in tapping his cricket bat, and he stood in front of 16 or 17 young men. He said, who said it? Silence. And I don't know why nobody gave up the culprit, but the culprit gave up himself, because Lindsay was going to line us all up and start with the cricket bat. We knew it, he knew it, the culprit knew it, and the culprit knew that if he started one end of the line went all the way through, the beating the guy got after it was all over would be worse than he got from Lindsay. So he volunteered that he had said this, and they disappeared. I saw the culprit again, so it wasn't corporal, or it wasn't capital punishment, but it was good enough. Red Hook left us all with, again, experiences and friendships. The thing that is curious to me now that I think back on it, and it may have become because of polio, but when we would say goodbye to our friends in June, I'd never see anybody again. We'd go out to the farm. I think there was a sort of a distinction between kids who lived on farms and out there and kids who lived in the village. Bill and Eddie Sunday and all those guys seemed to have a group in the village. But out just 2 miles away, like Jack said, you didn't go over the hill. And when you went to Poughkeepsie to buy school clothes, it was like the biggest adventure you could ever think of doing. So it was a really different world. And I can remember after basketball practice, me and Donnie Kahn and Glenn Kilgore and guys walking up 199 in the middle of the street at 6 o'clock at night with the snow falling, and there wasn't a car anywhere about. Back to traffic, front to traffic, made no difference because there was no traffic. So those of the population who are growing up today missed a lot, in my view. And I think those kinds of experiences and the kind of close-knit group we had in this school and the fine teachers we had and the administration, we think what this school has sent kids to every university in the country. I mean, to the Ivies, to the teachers' colleges, everybody went. It was unbelievable, the product of this community. Anyway, and the older I get and the whiter my hair becomes, and I'm as old as the school, 60 years for me this year or last year. I forget so much now. I have seen moments where things just go, and so I can't tell you all the stories that I used to once know, but they were tame compared to what they're telling now. They were tame. I mean, it was unbelievable. What a way to live, though. It was great. So thank you for putting up with me. Thank you.
I think it has to be a remarkable school that has not only the chairman of the Dutchess County Legislature, but also the district attorney in the same class. So Bill O'Neill, do you want to defend yourself? You and the other.
I'm only the chief assistant district attorney, so I'll always be number 2 as long as Grady is around. But I think when I think about the school, I think in terms of my parents, who came to Dutchess in 1932, roughly, and then bought a farm up to the north, and then started raising their family. So when this school was built, my brother John was in the first kindergarten class, and so our family produced 3 of us that graduated. Class of 52 was my brother John. I graduated in 56 with Woody, and my sister Claire in 60. I remember my mother having a very special feeling for this school. First of all, she was an artist, and she even taught here. In those days, of course, you didn't have to have a teaching certificate, I guess, to teach art, and she was surely qualified, except for the idea of keeping discipline. That wasn't too automatic for her. But she loved this school. She was a PTA president and things like that. And I think she instilled in our family, a certain feel for the place. But the visual effect of just walking by the school, as you mentioned, Jack, the setting of the school, listening to the chimes. Growing up in Red Hook, you would hear those chimes start, whatever they played every hour and a half hour. That sort of thing. A wonderful, wonderful experience. And I think the feeling that with this school and the quality of the life here was also, of course, an appreciation of the faculty. And I can remember, always being told about this great group of men and women, like right after World War II, who came, to Red Hook, and they started Park Avenue and lived up there, and the quality of people who taught in school. That was just in the days when at Christmas time you probably get a bottle of whiskey. I'm sure my mother has given, Mrs. Hagan a bottle of whiskey. Not to hope that poor John would get through the class, but he was just given because that was what you did in those days. There was a certain respect and camaraderie. She loved teaching here, and when I sit in this cafeteria, you think of a bunch of things. Dancing, we used to dance here and learn how to lindy, but the cafeteria, I remember, just the food that they served here and the people who worked in the cafeteria. I can't remember the names now.
Mrs. Kipp.
Mrs. Kipp, yeah.
Mrs. Kipp's meatloaf.
I mean, it was like, it's a privilege for you to go to this school and have those meals. The meatloaf was special. Then there was the chicken, the macaroni, whatever it was. But every day there was a special something that was made here. And I think in our family, we've had kids in this school district now every year since 1938, just about. But they're probably all gone now. But lots of times they would always bellyache about the school food and like that. I remember the days, and you see the meads here and all like that, when there was a threat of hail, and the whole school was let out, so that we could be bused to the orchards, and Rudy remembers, and Judy. You could be bused to the orchards and help pick up the. I don't think that they trusted us going up in the trees, but we pick up the drops, right? And you tell stories like that to people today, and they wonder about this location where you went to school. I think the idea of passing, like starting in one corner like we did in the kindergarten, and then you work your way up this way, and then up to the top of the hall. And when you're in this school, like Jack Lewis, he was a real man in the days when I was in high school. He's not much older than me, but yet if you were only 3 or 4 years ahead in school, it seemed like you were farther ahead than I think you like to real thing. So I think everything so positive, and if I sense a special treasure in Red Hook, like where a family leaves a special treasure at the same time that you obtain the benefits of an education like through this building and the camaraderie of the community like that. It's not my relationship with Woody alone, but and others here, but my sister Claire, who I think has that same sense of the community, and in her writings and in the interest she has in the school is what we feel very proud about.
What Greg mentioned World War II. I remember going out and collecting silkweed pods. We did it on our own time. Brought them in and put them in like onion bags, took them up into the attic and dried them. And we understood they were used to be big parachutes. I don't know if that happened. Can anyone
Milkweed.
what did I say?
No, you said silk.
Milkweed pods.
Milkweed.
I'm sorry, milkweed pods. Green pods?
Yeah, well, they're supposed to make the flotation device.
Life vest.
Like
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
That's one I
Jack,
did.
you also have an interesting story about the shortage of men in the orchard.
Oh, yeah. I can remember being allowed to take 30 days off school. It's inconceivable, and it was a very attractive offer for a 14-year-old. Because you get six weeks off, pick apples, and not have to make up the work. So we really took advantage of that. And in my case, living in the family, we could use the bucks. So it allowed me to, first of all, no income tax. In our family, we gave half to our mother, and I was able to have enough left over to buy my school clothing and buy all my school lunches for the rest of the year, just working that 6 weeks. I worked at Delafield's, and I still have my work permit with John Ross Delafield's signature on it. And some of the people, I remember J. Wilbur Jones, who replaced the principal car, going out with teachers and pollinating, hand pollinating. I remember that. And collecting junk also. We call it the war effort. Now you have to say what war. We always said it was one war as far as we were concerned. Everybody, the whole community was involved in it because the field was a field where Getty gas station is presently. That was a field. We played ball there until before and after the war, and that was just filled with junk. I can remember having, I think every school back then, maybe it was a law, but we had a commando course. Everyone, all the gym classes had, boys had to take part, qualify.
There was an 8-foot wall you had to jump over, and that was a challenge.
Along the line there,
Yeah.
going over to the high school, where the sidewalk is, north of the track crossing. So we talk in terms of the war. And another thing, not related to school necessarily, but they had those, I call them lookout towers, but they really weren't a tower, where the people volunteered to spot airplanes. Can someone elaborate on that?
Spotters.
Spotters?
Up on Chamberlain Hill.
One up there.
Yeah, they had them up here too.
Kay Dillon said there was one over on, down the road by the Elks there. Correct?
That was after. It was up on Chamberlain Hill first.
They moved it over
Then
there?
they moved it over.
Or did they have two of them?
No,
Well, it was supposed to be no airplanes within 30 miles of Hyde Park,
So,
because Roosevelt was sometimes there.
so if you, I volunteered at the place, and I can remember going up there, and if you saw any airplanes, they were way the hell over there, or they were way the hell over there. And then you couldn't count them or anything else.
I think we had the farm behind Peter's Inn, Mill Road, and across the street on the little high level was the
But that was the second one.
So
I
that's,
didn't say it, but my,
There's one up by Ed McNally.
I remember my mother was the air raid
Yeah.
coordinator, and we would go there as a kid. What they did was they teach the silhouettes of the Japanese and German planes. I don't know if anybody figured out how a Japanese plane was going to get that much about. But still, you would study the silhouettes of those things, and I'll tell you, I got pretty good at that. And then you would stand up on the tower and you look across the river. You know, today when those mountains, Purple Majesty, when that gets started, you can't see a thing. So I mean, they used to say, well, how's this ever going to happen? Because the Japs come blow over the valley, you never going to see it. But yeah.
You guys must have succeeded because the Japanese never got past that.
Sid, would you like to comment? And further, what you've already offered?
Well, I don't know. My memory isn't too good, I guess. But I started as a sophomore when they opened this building. And I was started in the agricultural department, which was brand new. And our teacher was Leonard Gunch. And he took a group of his future students to the state fair the end of August in 1939. And on the way home, we heard that Germany had invaded Poland. It was kind of a sad trip home, as I remember.
Wasn't it the last state fair for a while? I'll bet.
Gee, I don't think so, because Duchess is claiming 154.
Continuous?
Yeah, so I can't remember whether we had them during the war or not.
I'm interested that you actually had classes in agriculture, Sid? What
Well,
was
yeah,
it?
they started it, yeah. And
You wore uniforms.
no,
Just a jacket.
we had
Yeah, I had
jackets.
a jacket. I was jealous.
The ag colleges, including Cornell, you were allowed to start there with an ag diploma from New York State High School.
It gave you automatic admission?
Yes,
To the state?
but they didn't do the chemistry for us. That was my downfall.
Then with the passing of the farm, so to speak, or the majority of the farm, I think, one of the Greggs mentioned that in 1940, if I'm not mistaken, there were like 50 farms in Red Hook. Does that make sense, sir? Quite a few of them.
There were more than that, I think.
A lot of mom and pop operations, but, and then when that was phased out after World War II, shop, and then they put the building out here, made a shop, and the junior high and that. And of course, then that changed to no longer industrial arts, right? They had what they call technology with computers, electronics, and all that. I'm sorry.
Too many people.
So that was one big change in the curriculum. So that whole 3 phases, as I recall.
Because my boys were in that.
That was part of it.
Anyone else in the audience care to comment? Bill?
Well, I forgot to mention, when I think of this building like as the community center, I'm reminded, and somebody can help me out with this, but when Marjorie Campbell became the cherry pie baking queen of America. What year are we talking?
55.
55. And I wasn't a rugged athlete like Woody. I played the tuba in the high school band. But anyway, so what happens? They grab the Red Hook band, and we go down to the railroad station. I don't know if Judy was there too. And we're down the railroad station, and the big old steam engine's coming in. And then she got off the train. We played and we marched, and then everybody came up to this to the auditorium, and there was a huge celebration for Marjorie Campbell. I'm reminded of the minstrel shows we used to have here. And I don't want to throw names out, but like Batty Bathrick with black all over his face sitting there making people laugh. And, I mean, different, not characters, but people, different people from the town and the community.
It was mainly the firemen,
I think so, but it was wonderful fun. And thinking of Christmas shows when Ronnie Teeter's brother, the great singer there, what's his name? Norman Teeter singing All Holy Night. It's like everybody in the community. I was just sitting, it was a wonderful gathering of people. The card parties that the Catholic Church put on. Right? They used to, come over here and play canasta in a certain time of the year, and I'd go home with a cross with Jesus on it and something like that.
Do you remember the circus? Does anybody here remember the circus?
I was going to ask that question, but I don't remember. I remember an elephant coming in and going into at the gym. They took that center post off. And I said, how did they get in there? And Bob said, like, down on their knees. Right?
Yeah.
I don't remember that part.
But they called it a pachyderm, so we all didn't know, is that an elephant or what is that? And it was an elephant.
That was in the early 40s. J. Wilbur Jones brought that up.
Yeah.
He replaced Mr. Carr.
The circus was right in the
In the
school.
gymnasium.
Oh, yeah, they had the,
Complete
they had the rings
trapeze.
on that side. Yeah, the trapeze and all that.
No kidding.
Probably 42. Another thing back then, I can remember when Mr. Jones took over. For Christmas parties, they would send the buses out and bring us in at night and have a play and hand out candy and oranges. That was great.
Well, J. Wilbur Jones, when he took over, I think he was principal of Tivoli.
Right, he was the principal of Tivoli
It's
before.
funny, we had 2 principals, neither one of whom wanted to use their first names. We had G. Wilbur Carr, we had J. Wilbur Jones. But J. Wilbur Jones, we were playing soccer. I think the last year you probably played soccer.
Yeah, I
As a
played.
senior, and I played as a junior. Well, he wanted football, so we had football the next
Well,
year.
he came at midterm.
Yeah. But anyway, because of rationing, gas rationing, we ended up taking the Twilight bus line to some of our games. We also took, we actually took the New York Central out of Rhinecliff, went to Albany and played Averill Park, and people picked us up with age stamps on their windshield and took us back to Albany, and then the school sprang for a state dinner at the Tenite Hotel. And I can remember one of the guys who I guess wasn't used to being in the big city of Albany said, I'll just have a peanut butter sandwich. Well, I think he had steak like the rest of us. But anyway, I think that's the only football team that ever went to a game on the train from Red Hook.
Did you have school buses in those days, or how did people get to school?
We had 3 or 4, 5. Weren't many.
Well, I was in the Upper Red Hook School District for 8 years, and our district hired a bus to bring their high school students into Red Hook. It was was uncommon. It was a first, I guess. They did it.
But the first year they centralized.
Yeah, they had buses.
They had these buses, but they were a beautiful maroon and cream color. I mean, it wasn't the standard orange like there is today. And everybody, oh boy, those are great. But of course, it made you wonder if they were maroon and cream, why were the school colors red and white? They didn't quite fit it.
A lot of the, well, Harry Kane and his sister, when they spoke, he's 29, class of 29, and she's the class of 35 or 36, if I recall. They talked, this is before centralization, but they talked about just setting out for school every day and hoping that someone would pick them up along the road and give them a ride into town. And most days that was what happened, and it was the nature of the community to support the kids that way. If you passed a kid on the road on his way to school, you gave him a ride.
Well, there was a creamery over where the co-op isn't the co-op anymore. Agway, or, doesn't matter, Max Agway. And I believe that at that point, or at 30 years ago, or no, 50 years ago, there were 300 different farmers that brought milk to that creamery. They'd be coming in every morning, and a student could get a ride with almost anybody if they didn't mind sitting on a milk can.
There are probably so many farms in Red Hook now, depending on how you define it.
But there's only one that has dairy cows.
Yeah.
Sid, I'm curious about the Upper Red Hook School. Can you tell us about that? That was one of the smaller schools that were centralized.
Oh, no, it was one of the bigger.
One of the bigger schools.
One of the bigger schools.
We had 8 grades, four grades to the room. There were 4 rows of desks, and each row was a different grade. And then 2 rooms. And when you got upstairs, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th, why, you were in the big time. When I started, they had 80 students. And when I finished, we only had 60. It was the Depression, and people were moving away, and birth rates were a little lower.
You had Henrietta Fraley, right?
Right, yeah.
Who else? Must have had another.
Gracie Gick from Rhinecliff. And Harriet, your father and my father were on the school board when we centralized.
I went to the one-room school
Yeah.
in Covertown.
Oh,
Stein Schiff.
8 grades in one row.
Stein Schiff was our teacher there.
I just want to add one thing, then I'm going to go get my pizza. The one thing I want to tell you is that in 1948 and 49, my parents ran a radio show which went nationwide. And we ran from the farm, and it was called Red Hook 3-1. And what they would do is get local people on, and the local people would talk to them, and then it would be the radio program ran on the Mutual Broadcasting System, now defunct. But in those days, it was one of the top 3, ABC, CBS, NBC, and Mutual. And they would get on the local police officer, they would get on the principal of the school. We have stored in our basement a lot of the discs, 12-inch discs from those days. And there's just 2 anecdotes that caught my eye. I listened to this one not long ago. This is my mother and father now dead, mother in Ferncliff, talking to my future in-laws. Because we had 4 boys and they had 4 girls, and my parents and their parents were very close friends. So there always got banter about who would do what. This program was made in 1948 when my father said to Frank Smithers, "Oh, I'm sure that one of these days, one of my boys will marry one of your girls." That was in 48, and I married Tibby in 1963, so that was very prophetic. But I will leave you with this note. You were talking about teachers, right? Well, one time on Red Hook 3-1, they had the hired man on. Now, this is nationwide. And the following discussion took place between mother and father and Walter Sissom. Walter Sissom was the hired man who came with the farm when we bought the farm. We had half the house, and Walt and his family had the other half of the house. And in the one-room schoolhouse down by the stone church. And his teacher's name was Bertha Pitcher. And over the air went the following remark. When asked about his schooling, Walt said, "Yep, I was in the one-room schoolhouse down at Rhinebeck." Father said, "Well, how was it?" "Well," he said, "my teacher was Miss Bertha Pitcher. And I don't know nothing because she didn't know nothing." Out of the mouths big. Thank you. I'm going to take two of them. Thank you. Thank you very much.
One of the things that interests me, as I said, is athletics, and the girls' sports scene in particular, in the 30s and 40s, 50s, 60s, there were no girls' teams. They had intramurals, and girls' basketball had 6 players. Right, Harry, you were involved with that. And then with the onset of Title IX, I think in '72, federal law required equal facilities and sports programs for the girls. And you just sit back and marvel at what has happened here at Red Hook with our girls' programs. They've just done a tremendous job. So many have gone on, got scholarships, full ride in many cases. So the way that has mushroomed, it's just amazing to me. And I sit back and marvel at it. And it's so long in coming. Why all those years you say to yourself, nothing for them. I think way back in the 30s, Rhinebeck had an outstanding team. Their girls' team won a state championship or something. I don't know how that happened. Someone that knows more about it than I have. So comment on that.
Yeah, because I can remember seeing girls play over hard in the 30s and late 30s. And so you're saying we had girls then, and then it went away.
I just remember reading about the Rhinebeck team in the 30s, but when I was here when school opened, until 1972, there were no girls interscholastic sports, is what I think, correct, Harry?
Right.
Until the onset of Title IX.
But in the 30s, did we have some? Because I remember them playing over there.
I don't know, but the reason Rhinebeck had a girls' team, they had a gym in their old building.
Yeah,
And we didn't have anything.
right.
That's the reason
Just not
Rhinebeck had
a
a
very high
girls' team.
priority, I guess. Now you're anyone else have anything to add or subtract?
Jack?
Correct?
I might just say a few words as a veteran of 3 classes here in elementary school. Mary Brewster, Paul Beerwish, and Alice Boyce. Alice was pretty tough. And Mary Brewster was just a sweetheart. And but what Woody said about the threat of discipline was very real. And all you had to say, or all you had to hear as a kid, was Mr. Van Stone. And you behaved. And above Mr. Van Stone was Roscoe Williams. A couple of years ago, I was doing a historic preservation ceremony in a pretty obscure place way, way upstate, Fort Miller, in upper Washington County. And it was in a church. They were putting the church on the National Register, Reformed church. Very nice church, very nice community, nice congregation. And they said that at the end of the ceremony, they wanted to have a photograph with the most senior elder of the church. And I said, fine, sure. This gent, pretty spry, I'd say, well, maybe 75, and they came forward. And he introduced himself as Roscoe Williams. And my knees started to go. And I said, it's amazing. I said there was a guy about 60 years ago. Well, I didn't want to say that he was then about 70 years old, but that's what I was thinking. And this guy said, you're looking at him. Roscoe Williams. I couldn't believe it. The guy was absolutely the way he was. And I thought maybe this is Roscoe Williams' son or the grandson. If he had said, let me introduce you to Calvin Coolidge, I couldn't think of it. So we talked about Red Hook, and he had very happy memories of it. And I kept looking at that man afterwards, and I just think, it's just not possible. I was counting off the decades of my life. How could this guy? Oh, of course, when you're very young, anyone who's about 20 years old or looks ancient, but still, Roscoe Williams must have been well into middle age when I remembered him here. And
Jamie came.
This was 51, 53, something that was along there. But I just, for all I know, Russell Williams is still alive and well in Fort Miller, New York. Must have been the apples he ate when he was down here.
That was Phil Jones.
Phil mentioned that.
Oh, maybe.
Phil Jones is.
Jay Wilbur's from Boonville. As a matter of fact, when I was a freshman playing JV basketball, he took both JV and varsity and the cheerleaders to Boonville for a weekend to play their team, and the following year they came down here.
Second prize was 2 weeks ago.
That's a real snowball.
When Jack was here, the students, the most frequently asked questions, and Emma, I think you remember, the kids wanted to know most about corporal punishment. Right.
Yes.
What happened to you if you did something bad, something wrong? And also about how much homework you got. Those were the typical questions from the students.
He also wanted to know, did you have a dress code?
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Right, very important to them.
And what was your answer?
I said, yeah, we sort of all dressed alike.
do
That was our
today.
dress code. It was called peer pressure, I guess, and nobody seemed to object.
Well, the girls were not allowed to wear pants.
Oh, no.
Had to wear skirts.
I didn't mean the boys and girls.
Yeah. I think we had some of those things we got from home.
What, saddle shoes?
No, I mean some of the fear,
The rules
peer
of-
pressure.
Oh, yeah.
As I said, my father was on the school board, and I was told in no uncertain terms, never play hooky. Never. And it worked pretty well.
Emma,
I wanted to add something to that about corporal punishment. One little boy said to me, when you got trouble in school, did you go home and tell your parents? And so I said to them, well, look, everybody was friends with everybody else. So if you did something wrong, it got home. And I said, but you were very careful that you would behave yourself, right? That was the one thing that they seemed to ask everybody was about corporal punishment. One of them said to me, how old are you? And I looked and I said, well, I'm 76 years old, but I don't feel it. No. Then one of them, we were talking about what I like to do and so forth, and I said, well, I like crossword puzzles. I said, you know, crossword puzzles can teach you a lot. I said, you know, you learn things that way that you really don't know you learn. So one little boy says to me, well, what if do you finish them? And I said, yes, most always. He says, well, what do you do when you don't finish them? I said, well, I leave them alone for a little while, maybe an hour or so, and then I go back. I said, then I realize what I didn't get. Oh, they were very astute, but one group were very bored, very bored. And I have to say that I was very frank with them. I said to them, you're very bored. You don't even want to be here. I said, I'm going to tell you something. You have the opportunity to have the best education that you can get. And I said, I challenge you to do the best you can and be as smart as I am when you get my age. And I meant it.
you spoke well.
I marvel at that vote that was taken back in the 30s, 866 in favor of consolidation against the 117. That's amazing when you think about it. These eight little school districts.
Yeah, something like that.
They all had boards of education who had to be dissolved, and put that all together and bring it back into the consolidation, centralization. And you get 88, I guess it's about 88% of the vote. That's amazing to me.
And I wonder what percentage of them even graduated from high school. I know my uncle, Will Burnett, who was the funeral director, was on the school board a few years before the centralization. I don't think he ever graduated from grade school, to tell you the truth. And you have to admire people like that, who, even though they didn't have the opportunity themselves, went out on a limb and did all this work and gave us this wonderful
shaped town.
Some of the documents that I copied that are on the tables include little position papers that I think might have been prepared as representatives from Red Hook went to other towns like Rhinebeck, and they listed their arguing points in support of centralization, why Rhinebeck should come in, for example. There's also in there a letter, a very late letter from Tivoli, because they initially said no, and then regretted their decision, and they regretted it evidently, they regretted it too late, because they were not part of the consolidation. They didn't come in until mid-60s. In fact, we have boxes, and the district has boxes and boxes and boxes of attendance registers from Tivoli, because they shipped them over lock, stock, and barrel.
When they did this.
Yes, if you look at the inventory of the district archival holdings, we have these boxes and boxes of attendance registers. I can't help but feel that there are other district archival pieces that are in people's attics, because we had all of these little districts, but we only have a handful of the minutes books. And they must, like the last secretary, it just went into the attic and stayed there, or something like that, because they've got to be around.
Am I correct in believing that Pine Plains had already centralized? I think the Seymour's first floor was built in 31. Rhinebeck, had they centralized?
No.
What were they?
Well, that's the reason we could send our high school to Pine Plains, because they had a brand new building and they hadn't built it yet. We had our own rooms and our own teachers. I mean, the whole kit and caboodle went over.
When would Rhinebeck have centralized?
It was after ours, but I don't recall. It was after
No, they had
ours.
that big building.
According to the newspaper reporting of 1939, prior to the fire, there wasn't a great deal of enthusiasm for building a new school. And as I have put it, the decision was taken out of their hands. And then it became financially advantageous to move ahead as quickly as possible and get the what probably was near the last of the government funding for such building projects. The WPA and the funding agency for this had other alphabet initials because of PWA, right. It was the WPA and then it became the PWA. But anyway, many schools, Catskill Middle School is another WPA or PWA
Another
building.
three-letter school.
Yeah, right. And they really made an effort to have them in keeping with the historical nature of the area. This one doesn't look like an old stone building, but Catskill Middle School, current middle school, which is probably a high school now, does. And it too is filled with original furniture.
Well, Roosevelt was supposed to come to the inauguration or the opening. Dedication, yeah. And Hitler changed that with his attack on Poland.
Just days before.
Yeah. Oh, just
5 days, 6
4
days.
days. But Roosevelt came to the Rhinebeck post office dedication. I remember that. It must have been before that. It must have been before 39. Really?
Rhinebeck Post Office?
Really? Well, I remember they moved some army in for security, and they were like snipers. They were all over the roofs of the buildings. I remember that. I think I was a Boy Scout.
I was,
And
you and I were there. So you're saying it's lucky that the place burned down there?
Well, that's what it's a familiar story, not to change. Change is uncomfortable. It was going to cost a great deal of money. It's serving us well so far, et cetera, and then the fire just made it a necessity.
Did you read that they went to get the cornerstone out of that place and some vandals had already been in there? Is that in the Olympic?
Oh, I don't know. I think I heard the story from you.
Oh, you heard it? Well, I heard the story. That's the way it's.
It makes us realize how fortunate we are that you built that volcano, I think.
of the construction cost was federally funded? I mean, is it most of it, all of it?
Just over $200,000, and the building cost less than $600,000, and the contract is on the table, the specifications and the money.
So was there a local bond floated, or how was it, the rest of it handled?
Yeah, we have the records of all the payments into the 1950s, and, you know, it was a 30 year, I'm not sure. But, all that paperwork is there. But it was a phenomenal percentage of the money to get, from the federal government. But you had to move, and it was a very complicated affair legally and with the state law and all, to dissolve and come together.
Was the land given by the Deerings or whoever had this property, or was it purchased?
I don't recall, but it is accounted